me talking about bronchitis, which was a really big health issue for you as a younger person, right?
Younger and older. It was all the way up until I've had it for about 30 years. And so it was a lifelong thing up until 2015 when I started eating better.
So when did it begin?
Eh, well, it was when I was young and stupid, and I was working too hard. I lived back in Canada at the time, and I I just overdid it. I got a cold one time, and I just kept working and working, and didn't really take care of myself. And I ended up getting really sick in bed at home. I ended up missing work for 2 weeks, so all that overtime I was doing before didn't help me any. And I ended up being sick in bed at home for 2 weeks, and I was really, really, really sick, and I was coughing incessantly, and my lungs were so inflamed that the lining between my ribs and my lungs became inflamed. And so every time I coughed, I ended up having like it was like sandpaper rubbing together every time I coughed. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning. And I every year since that, without fail, if I got a cold in the if somebody had the sniffles and I picked up the cold, it would translate into bronchitis, and the bronchitis would last 4 months at least every year.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
it was just incessant coughing. I'd be awake at night, and of course, you're not getting your sleep. So because you're not getting your sleep, you're not getting better. You're not getting
Mhm.
better,
Yeah.
and it was just this endless cycle that just kept going on every year. And it got to the point where I would literally run from anybody who had the sniffles. Like I was petrified because I knew what would happen. And in the last 10 years, before I started eating much better, it just got increasingly worse and
Mm.
worse and worse. And every year it would be like I would just get the sniffles, um, and it would progress into bronchitis. And instead of just being coughing, I would choke. I would literally choke, like I would kind of turn purple, and then I would vomit because it was such an extreme reaction for my body. And this would go on, for several months. And so I will tell you that when I started eating better and then never had another episode of that, I was like dancing a little happy dance every year. It's a totally different thing from people who, have heart disease or, it's just it's a different story because I sort of, I felt it every year. It was pain, it was stress, and because every night I couldn't sleep, and it went on and on and on, and it was really horrendous.
I just amazing. I mean, how many, I mean, through decades you're talking.
I am talking decades, like 30 years.
And probably you just kept thinking, okay, I guess I have to just accept that this is what it's going to be for the rest of my life and perhaps get worse as I age, right? I mean,
Absolutely. And because I knew enough about health that I knew that colds are caused by viruses. So what was the point in going to the doctor? What were they going to do for me? And my husband kept saying to me, "You should go to the doctor." And I was like, "What are they going to do for me? It's all caused by viruses. I'm not going to
well, I
take
mean, in the
antibiotics."
beginning you were going to the doctor, right?
Just
When it
that one
first started,
time.
yeah.
Just that one time, the one time I was sick in bed,
Uh-huh.
I had been to the doctor, but it didn't really go after that because I felt it was just a cold. This all came from a cold. There's nothing that could be done. But towards the end, I think it was my very last episode where I didn't even know I had a cold, and I started to cough, and I choked, and I ended up vomiting. And my husband just said to me, "You have got to go to the doctor."
Now, when
And
was
so
this? When was this?
that was the year before 2015. So 2014 was my last bout of bronchitis.
Okay.
And I did go to the doctor, and what she did was she gave me an inhaler. And so I used that inhaler, and I had to use it every 4 hours
Mm.
to try to, mitigate whatever it was that was happening there. And I did finally, it lessened it for slightly because it wasn't a full 4 months that year, because I was getting more sleep because I was using this inhaler.
Hmm.
And so I was getting more sleep, and I ended up, um, not, not taking quite as long to get over it as I had all the other years. And that was the only time I ever used that inhaler. Was that one time,
Wow.
that one episode, because I didn't have any more after that.
Well, I'm glad that, I mean, we're going to be talking about adopting a whole food plant-based lifestyle and how that helped you, but I'm glad you're also talking about other pillars of health, because sometimes it's we get kind of carried away when we talk about the plant-based lifestyle, and it makes people think, oh, all I have to do is just change what I eat and everything will go away and I'll never get sick and, live to 102 or whatever. And that's not so. We can't
Absolutely.
prevent everything and we can't cure everything. And also, though, when you adopt a healthy lifestyle, there are other pillars of health, like you said, having sleep, mitigating stress, and there are other things as well. But those are things that you learned were a big part of your health.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they are things I've learned more and more about since I've, adopted this lifestyle. And I fully believe that all of them are really important. You know, food, they all interact really. And so I didn't know it at the time, but it sure made sense really when I look back at it now, that, I know I needed the sleep, and I wasn't really getting it. So I was taking a lot longer to get over these episodes.
Yeah, I mean, they say that some of the risk factors of bronchitis are that, like, you would have a higher chance of getting it if you smoke, or if you have asthma or allergies, or if you have a weaker immune system, right? So,
Right.
do you want to talk about that, and what what of those factors did you think were playing a part in your bronchitis, and
Sure.
how it kind of changed?
Yeah. I think that, um, you know, stress and having not a very good immune system was key, was totally key. And it was my lifestyle, like from early on in my life, even. Um, I had a sweet tooth from the time I was very young, and I was also spoiled, rotten, and so I was getting the sweets and the cakes in my lunch, and I just developed a real liking for them. And I literally would say that in my early part of my life, I was really a junk food junkie. And I, I would eat sweets and candy. I remember studying for university exams, and I would just eat bags of candy, just bag after bag after bag of candy. And I'm sure that none of this was ever very beneficial for my immune system. And um, I, you know, I had when I was 13, I had my appendix out, and we know these days now that that is all diet related. I didn't know then. And when I was 26, I had my gallbladder out. So 13 years,
26.
26, and I suffered great pain with that for about 6 or 8 months, because the attacks, when those would happen, I've never had children, but people have said that the pain from that is almost as bad as giving childbirth. And I was positively gray before they decided that I really needed to have surgery
Ah.
and have my gallbladder out. Now we know also now these days that that is also diet related, but ding, 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 my brain was not in in that sphere to figure out that my body's telling me things and I should be listening. And I was really concerned about when I got to be 39, because everything had gone in multiples of 13 at that point, what other body part I was going to lose. But thankfully, I did not lose anything. So I just kept trucking, and that was good. But, we ate out all the time. We both worked, my husband and I. We ate out 5 nights a week. We were going to restaurants. We were thinking we were doing fine. But, it's all, as Jeff Novick would call it, crap. It's calorie rich and processed. And it doesn't matter what nice restaurant you're going to, that's what you're getting.
Yes.
And those things just cannot, they are not feeding your body the things that you need. And I know I've told you, Amy, on occasion about my desserts, and I think maybe you have a true or false question about that, my dessert eating.
Yes. I think that's what we should do now. I think that we should play our game of true or false.
It's time for True or False on Be Green with Amy Live. Answer true or false to Amy's questions in the comments below, and Amy will ask our guest for the expert answer.
Okay, and you are the expert of Shiela. So, what do you think, Green Warriors? Put a guess. Before adopting a whole food plant-based lifestyle, Shiela had often eaten only desserts for supper and could do a lot of damage to a bag of chips. So type in your answers, and what do you want to say about that, Shiela?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's very true. I have gone to restaurants, buffet restaurants, and had only desserts, 6 or 7 desserts. I have gone to a restaurant and had only dessert for supper. And granted, the latter was just a special occasion, but nevertheless. And yes, we do not have chips in our house, because once a bag of chips is open, I can just sink my hand in there and keep, eating, even though I know how bad it is for me. So yes, all of this, I think all of this bad eating definitely did not help. There was nothing I was doing for my immune system. No, we would eat at home on the weekends, a little bit of veggies with our steak, and and so there was just nothing that was helping my immune system. And to be honest, and then when 2013 hit, that was a couple of years before I went plant based. I almost had a nervous breakdown at work because of my. It was just a perfect storm. I loved my job, but it was just a perfect storm that happened at that time. And I was working endless hours and stressed all the time. And again, all of these things, between food and between any stress, from work, that I had in my life, I am sure that none of that helped me at all. I'm sure it did nothing and to help my immune system, and in fact made it much worse. And we know about how stress impacts your immune system, and we know about how all the foods that we eat now are so great for our immune system. So I just wish I had found it much earlier, but better late than never.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have one more true or false question, and that is, now I mean, it's no secret that you did adopt a whole food plant-based lifestyle, but the last non-compliant food that Sheila eliminated was jelly beans. True or false? What do you think, Green Warriors? Okay, Sheila, what's the answer?
Yeah, that unfortunately is a strange but very true thing, because like I said, I loved candy forever and ever, and I even found vegan candy. So it was even after we had gone plant based, I found vegan jelly beans, and so I've often joked with people that if it came to me giving up wine, and everybody who knows me knows I like my wine. Everybody, if it was giving up my wine or my jelly beans, which one would it be? And I often said it would be my wine, And in the end, it was it was the jelly beans that was much harder for me to give up. And by the way, I do not drink wine much anymore either. So I have learned about the impact of that as well. So yes, jelly beans were my holdout. They took me approximately 3 years after we went whole food plant based to finally give it up. And my husband and I used to have little arguments over it, and he'd be like, "What are you doing to your body? You should be giving those up." And I would, the only thing I could retort back was, "Well, when you give up your beer, I'll give up my jelly beans." And so we had kind of a truce there for a while, but I finally did. I don't know what it was either. One day I read something in one of the many copious books I had read, and something just went ding, ding, ding. And the box of jelly beans my last box of jelly beans sat in the closet for a year. I did not go near it. And then finally I just threw it out. But, to me, that just shows that I think when you make a decision about something, I think that's one of the biggest steps to being able to, do that thing. And so I am, to this day, I'm very thankful that I finally gave up my jelly beans, and I have gone, that we have adopted this lifestyle, and every year when fall and winter rolls by, and I don't get a bout of bronchitis, it's just like the biggest gift to me, and it's just like the gift that keeps on giving, I guess you might say,
Yeah, because you call it a bout, but really that a bout would be like what, a couple of weeks?
Yeah, you're right. They're more like episodes, that's for sure. Like it was, full on, just an onslaught. And I had to keep working at the time, of course, and that's the way life is, and you just keep going. But again, that's not letting your body heal and not doing anything to help the body. And so I just honestly could not believe, once we started eating this way, the effect it had. Like I just honestly could not imagine that it would have that kind of an effect on me. And there were other things like blood pressure. I was on medication for blood pressure. My cholesterol was inching up year after year, and my doctor was starting to want to put me on medication for that. And it just, I was not in good shape. And the fact that those things also resolved were like, icing on the cake. Now, granted, I worked really hard with my doctor to get her to look at all my readings. Doctors are not always willing to take you off medication.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did copious readings, 3 times a day of my blood pressure. And she finally admitted that, yes, indeed, I did not have hypertension anymore. And she wrote it off my chart. She just crossed it off. And that was just a fabulous thing. And my cholesterol, it didn't go down all that quickly, I must admit. It might have been those jelly beans, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But it did take a couple of years, and then finally it went down to where I would like it to be, which was the 150 that people talk about, that, gets you out of the heart attack range. Now, I know there's no guarantees. There's just no guarantees in life. But, aside from the bronchitis, these other things also resolved. And that's what I hear from other people too. They might have one major kind of thing, but then all these other things get resolved at the same time. And it just makes sense because, inflammation is one of those things that is a precursor to pretty well every one of our lifestyle diseases. And the way I was eating, I'm sure I had lots of inflammation in my body everywhere. And of course, that's not helping lungs at all, So I definitely feel that this was definitely the right way for us to go. I'm so fortunate that we found our way here, and I just wish it had been a lot sooner.
Yeah. Well, most people, when they adopt this lifestyle and have these positive effects, they often report the same thing. So let's talk about that. I mean, here you are every year after year, decade after decade, they're getting this bronchitis and other things that are happening to you health wise. And then suddenly you just go plant-based. So how did that happen? How'd you figure that out? How'd you come across it?
That's a good question. My husband had been, and again, it's one of those chance things. Like if this hadn't happened, I'd still be going down my merry little path, and who knows what things would be happening. So my husband was reading something in a forum about just people's most influential books, and one of the books that came out was the China Study. And so my husband got the China Study, and he read the China Study, but he did not tell me about the China Study for approximately 6 months. And we joke about that a little bit, but we think partly it was because he knew what would happen once I read that book. And so he, I think, maybe had to take a little time to make sure he was ready, to go down that journey with me as well.
It's like, I have discovered the truth, the scientifically backed truth, that what I am doing, putting the food on my plate, this food is not healthy for me. I know this, and I can't unknow it. And if I tell Shiela,
yep,
she'll know that I know.
that I believe is probably what happened. The reason he waited that long. And I remember when I read that book, and if you don't mind, I'll talk a little bit about the couple of studies that really were so impactful for us. When I read about the rat study with the casein, and casein is one of the major proteins in dairy milk, I stomped into his office where he was, and I just exclaimed, like, I'm so angry. I said, we have been lied to. We've been lied to forever. We've been lied to forever about these things. And so if anybody doesn't know about these studies, I'll just talk briefly about them because they were totally impactful for us. I don't really condone animals in experiments, but I know that's the way things were done. And I wouldn't be doing what I was doing if I hadn't read that. So Dr. T. Colin Campbell was a biochemist, and he worked at Cornell. He was a professor there, and he was doing experiments with rats. And what he did was he infected all of them with something called aflatoxin. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but it is a known carcinogen to the liver. And what he did was then divide the rats into two groups. One group got 5% of their daily calories having casein, which is, again, as I said, the major protein in milk. And the other rats got 20% of their daily calories in casein. And so he watched to see what would happen. And in the 5% group, no cancer started growing from the carcinogen that had been inflicted on the liver. But in the 20% group, and the 20% would equate to what us normally as humans would eat in our daily life, in every single rat, there were cancer. There were promotion of cancer. There were little lesions that started growing because of the casein. And both my husband and I were just totally floored by this. And Dr. Campbell went further, and he did what is called a crossover study, where half of the rats, again, had 5% of their calories from casein, and the other half had 20% from the casein. He saw what happened. In the 5%, again, there was no growth of cancer, even though they all had the aflatoxin. And in the second group that had the aflatoxin and 20%, the cancer started growing. So what he did is he switched the amount of casein that the two groups got. So the group that had 20%, where the cancer was growing, and he reduced it down to 5%, the cancer stopped growing. And in the other group, where there had been no cancer and they raised it to 20%, which is what we would normally have in our day, the cancer started growing. And to me, this was just so impactful. My husband joked with me. He said, "You've been trying to kill me all these years," because for many years I kept telling him, "You have to drink milk. You have to drink milk. You have to drink milk." Anyhow.
Right. And yogurt is healthy for you. And
Yes, milk does the body good.
yeah.
Anyway, the second part of his study was what broadened everything. And he and a colleague worked on doing a survey, a health survey in China, where the genetics of the people would be all pretty well very similar. So you can't blame anything then really on genetics. And he had like 6,500 people from 65 counties or something like that. And they found out what people ate, and they did blood tests, and they did all kinds of very strong technical scientific things. And what they found, they looked at all these correlations that came from the study, and they found about 8,000 statistically significant correlations, and they all were pointing in the same direction, which was that the more animal products that people ate, so that's meat and eggs and dairy milk, the more cancer they had, the more heart disease they had, the more type 2 diabetes they had. And the other places where the correlations were inverse, it showed still the same story, that those who had less animal products, they had less disease, they had less heart disease, less type 2 diabetes, and less cancer.
And I wanted to interject. Most likely, these animal products that these people were eating was probably grass-fed, organic, right? It wasn't
Right.
because some people are under the impression that if they just select a certain type of animal product, that it would be health promoting. So this was not like in the United States where a lot of people have that access. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to that point out.
But that's a really great point, because we know now the animals, as they're raised horrifically, just have so much more in, they have antibiotics, and they have all these other things that are making them do non-normal things, like give milk when they're pregnant and things like that. And so, yeah, to us, when we read these things, we were convinced. We didn't feel we could deny what he'd written. I mean, people might say, well, he could be making it up, but what would he have to gain from doing that? And he had all these papers.
He actually grew up on a farm.
And he grew up on a farm. That's right. And yes, exactly.
On a dairy farm.
On a dairy farm. And, he had nothing to gain by telling us these things. And so for the very first time in our lives, I believe we felt like we had some control over our health. And, we fell for the things like butter is back, and, oh, it's okay to eat eggs again, and, milk does a body good. And we were flip-flopping around like everybody else in the population. One day something's good for you, the next day it's bad. And once we read that, we just felt that that felt like the truth to us, and that started our journey. Like that first year, it was a transition year. I will say we weren't like some very brave people who just jump in and go full force. We ate some of the things that we had to finish them off, and then it said, we're not getting those anymore. And we were probably 80 to 90% plant-based in the first year. And, I would say something else that was very striking for us was that about 6 months after we had started to go down this journey, we had some dried sausage and cheese still left in the fridge. And that was what we had always eaten every year when we went to Florida for a little week vacation. This, again, very healthy. We would have dried sausage. We would have cheese. We would have bread dipped in olive oil. That would be supper, and that's what we had like 7 days in a row when we were there for a week. Anyway, we had some of this still left in the fridge, and that in itself might have been a little ding ding ding, because why should anything last in the fridge for 6 months? But anyway, so we decided, oh, we're going to try this, just out good, old time's sake. And we both thought it was the most revolting food we had ever tasted. Both of us we're like, how could we have eaten that? The flavor was crazy. And the thing that was so clear to us then is that our taste buds really had changed. And that's not something people really think about, that especially when they go down this road. They think, the food maybe not tasting so good right away, but the taste buds really, really change.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. So it was a strange thing to discover, but it was something that we were so happy we did.
That's it's so amazing. I mean, it was fortunate that your husband read the book, because so oftentimes the spouse, usually the female, will find out about this lifestyle and then struggle to get their spouse or partner on board. So that was kind of nice that the two of you went in it together. So tell me about the adopting the lifestyle and the bronchitis bouts episodes. How did that, when did they end, in, as far as coinciding it with the change in your lifestyle?
It was like bang on. It was once we started 2015, even though it was only 80 or 90%, I never had an episode that year, and I've not had one since.
So did you usually get it the same time of year?
Mm-hmm. Usually in the, sort of the fall, winter, the usual cold, the flu season. Mm-hmm. That's when I would get it. So yeah, it was like a perfect lineup. And
so were you bracing yourself? I mean, did you expect to get it anyway? Because it just happened so often, so many the decades. You would just you weren't thinking, well, I'll just be fine now. You were bracing yourself for it.
Totally. And all of these years since, it's not like I know COVID came to town and everything shut down. But before that, I had ample opportunity to get it, because I would go to yoga class 3 times a week, and there was always someone who had a sniffle or, a cough. And I'd always kind of think, oh, am I going to get it? And I never did. And I just sort of feel like doing a little happy dance every year when I sort of get by this time of this fall winter period and don't get it. But I am starting to have more confidence now, because I think I'd be surprised if I got it, because I'd be like, now what's going on? What thing is happening? I do believe, like I said earlier, that I think our bodies really talk to us, and we really should learn to listen, but not many of us do or have. But I think once we start to be a little more attuned, to our bodies and what they're telling us, I think we can really learn a lot, and we can then take measures to change things.
Yeah, you're so right. And unfortunately, so many of these things that our bodies, messages that our body is sending to us, just like with you, especially if it's over a long period of time, many year after year, feeling and day after day, I think people just think that it's just normal.
Absolutely. And this is the way it's going to be. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing I can do about it. And right. that's the crazy thing. Now that I feel like a convert, but that is the crazy thing. If people, and I was there, so it's not like I wasn't there. I did the same thing that everybody else is doing now, even. But if people could just take a moment to really think about their bodies and to invest in their health, because we spend decades working to put away money for our futures, but But do we ever think about investing for our health? I mean, if we get to those futures, if we don't have our health, what do we have? And I know that's easy. Maybe people say, "Well, that's easy for you to say," but this lifestyle is not. It's not that difficult. And when we started off, granted, we didn't know what we were doing, and yeah, we were like, well, what is, what would people always say? Well, what do you eat? And we were kind of like, well, what do we eat? And what we did is my husband cooked. I did not cook. And I'll just take a side on that. I called myself for the longest time a hypocritical vegetarian because I could not put meat in a frying pan and cook it because it was muscle. And I would look down at my muscle and think, I do not want to be sitting in a frying pan. And so I just could not cook. Anyway, fortunately, when we met, he really liked to cook. And so he always did cook. So at the beginning, it was always, when we started going down this path, it was him who said, okay, well, here's our recipes. How can we make them without these things? How can we make them without the meat? How can we make them without? And so, for example, we had a black bean soup. And this was an easy one because it had ham in it or bacon or something. So it was easy to take that out. Now, I will admit that when we did that, it really didn't have much flavor, and we kind of went like, so it wasn't so good. But when we added a little liquid smoke and a couple of other things, it actually became good. And that was our black bean soup up until we found a new recipe that we replaced it with about a couple of years ago. So, and then he would just go online and look up recipes, and he found so many great recipes. And we were like, wow, like this food is so good. And, I think that's part of the issue is people think you just are eating salads all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah.
We're not. I mean, yes, we love our salads, but our salads are not like the typical salad. Like we have grains in them and we have beans in them and we have tons of veggies and, things that are really going to fill us up, because that is the key to making this lifestyle work, is that you have to eat foods like potatoes and rice and all those great foods that we love.
Good stuff.
Yes. And those are the things that will fill you up, but you have to also, to get, great benefit, eat all those other great veggies too. Especially, the ones that I've learned over time, the leafy greens and the berries. And, how can people not like berries? How can people not like fruit? I mean, those are just so awesome. And, Dr. Greger has said you cannot eat too many fruit, which I just think is fabulous because I love fruit. And I think most people do. But anyway, veggies and nuts and seeds and legumes, and it really isn't that hard. And in fact, you realize that there's so much in life we've been missing out on. I didn't know about, farro or even maybe bulgur. I didn't know about these other grains. And it's just fabulous to, now be cooking and eating lentils, which I'm sure I never ate a lentil before, before going this way. And I sure never ate kale before going this way. And I will tell you that if you had asked me 10 years ago, would I eat kale ever? I would have told you were nuts. There was no way, And now I have it every day because I know how good it is for me. And it even tastes good. I've even had it in salads. Usually I have it in a smoothie, but I have had it in salads, and I've been like, wow, that's actually pretty good, So we're learning and we're adjusting all the time, our little journey, and it's a journey for everybody, and everybody's journey is different.
Yes, you're right. Everybody's journey is different. And we do after adopting this lifestyle, sometimes it can take a week or so before you start changing your taste buds and finding, but you still have to find what tastes good to you, and what tastes good to one person may not be something that's palatable for someone else. So I would definitely say you shouldn't give up, and you should actually just keep experimenting. But you're right. I mean, I've been doing this since 2012, and there's just so many foods, and I continue to experiment with things that I've never had before. And before this lifestyle, I basically ate kind of the same things, over and over again. And it's amazing the variety that you get. And yes, and you do feel so much better. And I'm hoping that people are getting inspired by this, because I I want people to see that, yes, we have people on the show that lost 200 pounds, or they climbed some mountain, or they did some kind of marathon or something. But not everybody is that way. Some people they just want to get healthy, and they
Right.
and it's not something that is not achievable, and you don't have to be some super spectacular person with certain attributes in order to make it happen. It can happen to anybody. You just have to give it a shot.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. And I think one of the things that actually would help people is cooking, because we know that when we eat out at restaurants, we don't have any control over the food that we eat, and they're usually full of oil and sugar and salt, and they do it because that's what everybody wants. It's
Yeah.
the it's what sells. But as I said, I really think it's important to cook, and I will admit that you heard me say I did not cook before, but with this lifestyle, I started looking at what my husband was cooking, and I went, oh, that looks good. Maybe I could try that, and I actually started cooking, and so I actually have a new hobby because I consider cooking to be a hobby now. Now I
Hmm.
know that's not the same with everyone, because
Right.
we we never had kids, and I know when you have children you have to cook and you have to feed them, and every day. But I think even if you do that, the things that you cook with now are so different compared to what you would have cooked with before, and I found it really creative, and um, I just fell in love with it, and it just surprised the heck out of me and my husband too, because he was the cook, and so we have a little system in our house, which I try all the new recipes from all those great Forks Over Knives magazines and the new cookbooks that come out. And I have become, I would admit, an addict, because I have many, many, many whole food plant-based cookbooks now, and probably will take me a very long time to go through them, but I will go through them. But what we do is I try new things, and we either give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And if they get a thumbs up, then they make it into our tried and true binder. And then my husband cooks those. So he does the tried and true things, and I
Mhm.
do the new things. And that works really well, because I really like doing the new things, because, like I said, I feel like it's creative, and I feel like I'm making something different all the time. And anyway, so that's kind of the little system that has worked for us. And I know that we are very lucky, because, as you mentioned, it's usually not this way. It's usually the female that finds the way, and then has to, try to work with her family, to go that way if they will. But I've realized in my family that my siblings, they don't live close to me, and I realize just how difficult it is when we know this information, and we just want the people we care about to know and to be healthy. And the thing is, we want them to be with us for a long time. And I know that my approaches at the beginning and for many years were just completely wrong. It's like,
I know.
you
Oh,
you
God.
must read this book. You must not. And I know you have to see it from the other person's side, and that's what we don't always do. That we wouldn't want someone telling us what to eat. And so, for all my family and friends, I apologize for my my crazy brashness and not really understanding what it's like, to have received what I was dishing out. And anyway, you can't change those things. We can only go forward. And so I am very happy that I found a group of people that I can share this message with in my little pod group. Because Amy, you're also a pod leader.
Yeah,
anybody,
wanted to let everybody know that a pod, it's kind of, if anybody's familiar with the website Meetup, it's a way that you can find people on Meetup. You can find people who have the same interests as you. If you like to play chess, you like to ride bikes, or whatever kind of interest you have, and you could probably find people either on the internet or actually locally that you could meet with that share these same interests. So that's what, because we just couldn't stop talking about this, right? we had to find other people that would want to hear what we were talking about instead of the family and the loved ones that were putting up with it. So that's kind of what happened with you and what happened with me. So why don't you talk about your pod and how that started and how it came about?
Sure. My pod started at the beginning of 2020, and it took me a while. I'm not really a brave, courageous person, and
you're here, but you're not brave.
Well, thank you. But I went to many health conferences, and one of those was Camp Plant Stock, and it was in Asheville. And I was so thrilled to find out that it was there. While I was there at a yoga class in the morning, again, it's one of these things that the opportunities just happen. I was telling people where I lived, which was Gainesville, Georgia, and some girl in front of me turned around and said, "I work in Gainesville, Georgia." And I went, "Oh." And I turned out that she was a pod leader for Plant-Based Atlanta. So she told me about it, but I was so excited about being in this forum of 700 people who ate and thought like I did that I completely forgot everything she said. So the next year, I was back at the Camp Plant Stock, and there she was again. And so I talked to her again. I said, "What was that group you talked about?" So she said it was Plant-Based Atlanta. And so I came back and I joined Plant-Based Atlanta. And I went to one of their events, even though I lived quite a ways away. And there I met, a small group of people that were eating like we were. But one of the things was that I met another person there who had also started a pod, and she lived much closer to me. And I went, "Oh, great. Well, I'll join that pod too." So I joined her pod, and I went to a few of her events. And then funnily enough, I had a plant-based doctor at this point in time here in Gainesville. And I asked him one time, I said, "Do you have many plant-based patients?" And he said, "Maybe 25. And I went, "Oh, okay." I was surprised by that.
Maybe 20. Wow.
I thought to myself, I have to find these people. Like, how am I going to find these people? And so that was the beginning of the pod, was me trying to find the 25 people in Georgia, in Gainesville, who ate like we did. And I started the group with myself and 3 or 4 people from yoga who also ate this way, and then the other pod leaders. So I guess it was like about 7 people that I started the group with. And little by little, it's grown. And I do a little happy dance every time I get a new member, because my feeling is about building community. And this journey is not so easy because of everything that's out there. I mean, you drive down the street and there's fast food everywhere, and you watch TV and there's commercials about fast food everywhere. And so I just thought, I think we can all do better working together than we can, just on our own and separately. And so I'm very happy to say that I now have almost 200 members, and I'm just so thrilled with all of them and the input that I get from them. And they're not just from Gainesville, they're from the surrounding areas. They're from all over Georgia, really. I also have people from other states. I have people from other countries because I used to work on an international project. And so I've sort of hauled some people in. I have someone from Croatia. I have someone from New Zealand in my group. So it's not like it's, got to be local, because I do things online as well. Like I have an online book club so that, there can be some participation online. And, we've had potlucks this year since COVID has sort of quieted a bit. And but I have been able to do them outside also, which makes it easier for people to come if they have any concerns about that. And I admit, speaking of COVID, that I had great concerns about it for myself, given my bad lung function now.
Yeah, Skylove wanted to know if you have been able to avoid it.
Thank you for the question. And yes, I have been able to avoid it, thankfully. I will say that I think my husband actually had it about 4 months ago, and I was waiting. I was like, but I never did get it. Again, knock on wood, I was so thankful. But both of us were really afraid for me, given I know that I have very much reduced lung function now because of all the damage I did. With this lifestyle, we can do as much as we can, and so many things can be reversed. Such as heart disease and type 2 diabetes, and even things like lupus and multiple sclerosis, and rheumatoid arthritis and pain. People that are just having pain, all these things can be reversed. I'm not saying there's guarantees, but they can definitely be reversed. But I know the damage in my lungs cannot be reversed because it's now scar tissue. So I just have to do the best I can with what I have, and that's kind of how we have to go through life, really, always that way, is just to do the best we can with what we have.
Right.
So thankfully, I avoided it.
And we in no way are promoting that this lifestyle keeps you from getting COVID or the flu or anything. But it probably might help you either avoid it, or if you did get it, maybe your symptoms wouldn't be as severe or make you put you in the hospital. But there's still no guarantees because there's just not enough known about it. So I just want to make sure that people listening are understanding that. When you, with your pod, you weren't meeting in person because of that. And so it wasn't that you were just super protected and felt that you could just go ahead and do that.
Yes,
So,
no.
Yeah.
And I know of people who follow this lifestyle, and they got COVID.
Yes.
And I know, the fact that, but I think they were protected. They were down for a couple of days, and then they were up, and it was okay. There were no severe cases from the people that I knew that had it. So definitely, for sure, we're not bulletproof with this lifestyle, but all we can do with this lifestyle is stack the odds in our favor. And, we can all choose what foods we eat, but we can't choose the consequences of those foods. And, I think that if we thought about the consequences, maybe things might be a bit different. I know I didn't. I sure didn't. And so I know it's hard for people, to think about these things, especially if they don't have a health condition. But really, this lifestyle is so much. It makes you sleep better. It makes you. I found it made me happier. I remember coming in from a walk one day, and I said to my husband, I said, I don't know what it is, but I said, I'm just happy all the time, And I said, do you think it's the food? And, I'm sure it was the food and, a bit of exercise. So between being happy all the time and sleeping well, I had the most energy I have ever had in my life. And my husband started calling me the Energizer Bunny. It was just kind of funny that these are things you don't expect to happen, or you have no, you just know, you don't know that they're going to happen, but they're just such wonderful things when they
Right.
do.
And the thing is that I'd like to tell people, from myself also, I mean, we're older now. So we should be having less energy, and we should be having more symptoms of things happening to us that are happening to our age mates, right? We're supposed to be declining, not.
Right.
And I feel, for me personally, I feel that I have more energy than I did before I just started the lifestyle. So, and there's
Absolutely.
things that I can do. Well, things I could do now I couldn't even do when I was a teenager, but which is
Right.
really amazes me. So, yeah,
Isn't that fabulous? I
yeah,
mean, it's so great when these things connect, things happen, you know?
yeah,
And they're kind of surprised because you don't know that they're going to happen.
right,
But they do for pretty well every person that goes this way. I hear the same kind of stories that this is how they feel, and this is how life is better, you know, in terms of, you know, sleeping better and being able to deal better with stress and everything else.
right,
It's
yeah,
the best. It's the best. I mean, I wish, if anybody out there is not, you know, going down this path, I I would really urge you to try it, even just for a month. A month. You don't have to think about all your life. Just try it for a month,
hmm,
and just think about all plant foods, no animal products, and no processed foods, and just see how you feel. And if you don't like it afterwards, well, go back. You know, there's nobody. You know, nobody's saying you have to go that way.
yeah.
So
I agree, and there's so many resources. I mean, back in 2012 when I began, there weren't as many resources to find recipes. So and to also not just find recipes, but to make them taste good, because that was the one of the things that my husband said, because I happened upon it, and then he was watching Dr. Furman on PBS as he walked by when I was watching it, and he kind of was getting an idea about it, and he encouraged me to buy the material and donate to the station. And and he said, and I said, well, what happens if I do and I buy it and I learn it, then what, and
right,
which kind of related to what you were talking about with your husband.
right.
I'm like, once I know, then what am I going to do about it? And he said, if it tastes good, I'll do it.
Oh, that's awesome. I
Yeah.
love it. I
Yeah. And
love it.
we also, it sounds like you went without sugar, oil, and salt, the SOS free.
We
Yeah. So,
did.
yeah.
I
And
mean,
that's
I would say for now, like now we will never do oil, no
mhm,
oil.
right.
It's sort of like the, you know, but but and then we will add a little bit of salt, but not
Mhm,
much. Like if
right.
a recipe calls for a teaspoon, there's no way I'm putting in a teaspoon of salt.
Yeah.
You know, I'll put in like an eighth of a teaspoon, or you
Mhm,
know, just some tiny little bit, but that's it. We don't use it very much. It's very minimal.
yeah.
But yeah, we did start out that way, and we've kind of backed off it slightly in the salt department, but that's about it. Still
Mhm.
no plain sugar or anything like that.
Or processed foods, right.
No processed
Yeah.
foods. No, 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 no.
So if
So
so what you wanna tell us, maybe something that you would eat in a typical day? I know a lot of times when the longer you've been with this lifestyle, it's not very interesting what we eat in a typical day, because we don't go all out and make fancy dishes and cook, so
right. Yeah, that's right. And it's actually a little funny because it certainly has changed over time. You know, when we started out, I remember our breakfast, this was 2015-ish. Our breakfast would be an English muffin, and we'd pile it high with peanut butter, and we put like flaxseed on it, and we put peanuts on it on top. You know, we'd have jam on there as well. So we thought we were doing great. And
yeah,
granted, it
plant-based.
was better than it's always compared to what you were doing, right?
Yes.
And definitely we were doing better. So these days, we start off our day with homemade muesli, which is made of barley wheat and barley, rye, and oats. And then we add in the muesli is made with also dried fruit like goji berries and golden berries, and either cherries or dried blueberries. And then we add in the nut part. So we have sunflower seeds, and then we have pumpkin seeds, and then we also have flax seeds. So that's our base. But then I always cut up fresh fruit to put on top of that. And then I also make my own soy yogurt. And what I do is I use frozen fruit and I blend that in with frozen fruit. So one day it might be a strawberry yogurt, the next day it might be pineapple, or it might be mango, and then it's whatever berries I would put on top. So that starts us off with a really big breakfast, and it keeps us full. Partway through the morning, though, we have a green smoothie, because this is my way of making um, sure that I get those greens, because they are all important greens, and I want to make sure I get them now. So we have greens in our smoothie, and we also have more berries in. We have a banana, and we have various spices, and all the spices come from Dr. Greger's How Not to Die book, or How Not to Diet. And when we couldn't figure out what to do with them, we just added them into the smoothie. And so our smoothie has this really crazy spice mix, but it's all from Dr. Greger. Anyway, then for lunch, it's either it's often something heavy. We try to eat heavier for lunch, so it could be like a chili, something with a lot of beans in it. It could be a pasta. We don't eat much pasta, so it's usually like more chili or some kind of bowls. I love bowls where you just kind of throw everything in, but it always has like grains or potatoes and things like that make it much heavier. And then at night we try to have a lighter meal. So we try to have, either a salad or a soup. And we both love soup, and we both love the kind of salads that we have, because the dressings are just so amazing and they make everything just shine. All those veggies have great flavor on their own, but all those dressings that you find, no oil, they're just made with like, mustard and maybe vinegar and, I don't know.
Dried fruit, nuts.
Dried fruit. Yeah. They just are amazing. So, that's pretty well it. And that's pretty well it every day. Like we have the same breakfast every day, except for weekends. And on weekends, I try new stuff. Like I love breakfast bakes, or, breakfast burritos. And I'm just so in love with the food. Like I can't even believe that I lived a different way before, and it tastes so good, and it makes us feel good.
Yeah,
It's kind of
exactly.
like a win-win.
Right. You have to eat a lot, because it's so not very calorie dense. So that can be a challenge sometimes, because you have to really eat a lot. So people out there that are thinking about that, I like to eat, so it's been really a lot of fun for me. But you don't get that bloated feeling afterwards, as long as you eat enough until you're comfortably full. You just feel normal. You don't feel your stomach distended or anything, because as long as you eat until you're comfortably full, and you don't feel hungry between meals, like an hour or 2 hours later, you don't feel like, oh, I still need to eat, because the fiber just really helps sustain you through in between meals. And if you had to skip lunch for some reason, you probably wouldn't think about it too much, because it still kind of sustains you.
Absolutely. And I should have mentioned too, just based on what you said, you don't need to snack. And it's true. You don't need to snack, but because I feel we still need to eat fruit, I still eat fruit during the day, even when I'm not hungry. And I know Dr. Furman, he talks about don't eat when you're not hungry, but I thought, how do you get all this food in? if you don't, put some snacks in there, but our snacks are fruit. And I always try to have lots of fruit in the house. And last week, for whatever reason, we were fruit deficient. And I felt it. I was just like, oh my God, where's my fruit? So anyway, I love my fruit. And
the same way you would have panicked about jelly beans, you're now panicking about fruit.
You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. It's been a great turn of events, I would say.
Wow. Well, oh my goodness. You just had such a great story to share. And I'm so glad that you told us about your pod, and we'll have all those links in the show notes for people, so that they can see how to get in touch with you or how to get to join your pod, because they can join it virtually. So
Absolutely.
they can
Love
definitely
new
do
members.
that. Well, I really want to thank you, Sheila, for sharing your compelling story of how you resolved your chronic bronchitis and your other health issues, and talk to us about how you created that pod. And there's just so much that you have to offer. And everybody, just please click like. That's how we applaud. If you can click like and show your appreciation for what Sheila shared with us today, I would really like that. And also, if you can type in the comments, tell us, what are you going to remember? What's your takeaway? So that other people in the future can see what this is about. And please stay tuned for a special announcement. I do want to thank Just Has Voice, because she did the voiceovers and she did the promos. And Just Has Voice, who's coming up next?
Worried about osteoporosis? Fitness instructor Angela Fischetti resolved her osteoporosis and will demonstrate full body exercises to help build bone density on Wednesday, November 9th, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, on Be Green with Amy Live.
And again, Sheila, thank you. I know this was your very first podcast, and I'm saying your first because I have a feeling you're going to be doing more.
Yeah.
And you were awesome.
Oh, thank you so much, Amy. It's been a total privilege for me to be here. And I applaud everything that you're doing. And I just thank you so much for letting me come on here. And I will just say to people, I volunteered for this about several months ago. This past week, I've really kind of gone, what was I thinking? But Amy makes it so easy and fun, and I'm very thankful for all that you do, Amy. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Sheila. And I wanted to offer a gift to everybody that's watching or listening, because if you weren't here, we wouldn't be doing this. And so most of all, I really want to thank the audience. And as a gift to you, if you just go to begreenwithamy.com/join, I'm going to send you 5 free recipes. And then after that, I won't say anything else. So you won't be on a mailing list or anything. But I just want to share with you. And you'll also see some pictures of me doing some fun things and learn a little bit more about me and my life and what I'm doing with my plant-based lifestyle. And if you guys can take your right hand and grab your left shoulder and your left hand and grab your right shoulder, and now give it a squeeze, because that's a hug from me to you. And if you could join me and Sheila with my tagline, and that is the be strong, the be well, and the be green. And she's going to say green at the end. You can type that in the comments. Are you ready, Sheila?
I'm ready.
Okay. Well, until I see all of you again, remember, be strong, be well, and be
green.
Green.
Namaste.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you, Amy.
Bye, Sheila.
Bye.
Now you can listen to Be Green with Amy expert interviews wherever you go. Listen while walking, meal prepping, or traveling. Find Be Green with Amy on Apple, Google, Alexa, Amazon, or virtually anywhere you find podcasts. Be strong, be well, and be